Hello, everyone. Today, I'd like to talk about monster debut albums by a musical artist or a musical group. And is it worth having such a thing? Now, let me put some constraints on that definition. So, let me define monster debut album. The monster part has to be a debut album where at least 50, not at least, more than 50% of the songs on that album need to be bona fide hits. Okay, whether charted or played, whatnot, it has to be known. Okay. Second of all, the artist or the group needs to be relatively unknown during the time their debut album came out. So I'm eliminating artists that were from maybe another band that people already knew and it just kind of broke off and went solo or formed another group and whatnot. I'm eliminating that criteria or eliminating that from the definition itself. And, you know, when you take everything into consideration, there's obviously not that many groups. You can probably count like on one hand of artists or groups that fit that criteria and had monster debut albums. And really, for me, the only one I can think of, and I think majority of you would already know and think the same, would be Boston's debut album, right? This, no doubt about it, this is not only their, one of the greatest debut albums of all time, if not the best, but probably one of the greatest rock albums of all time, hands down. I mean, every song on here were bangers, and I think majority were charted hits. So, hands down, I mean, no doubt about it. Now, here's the thing. Let's say if I was Boston, okay, would I want to have a debut album like this? Call me crazy, but probably not. If I was Boston, I hindsight for me, I would probably not want to have this. And no, hear me out. Hear me out. So we know Boston's discography, right? We know what they output since their debut album. So their second album, Don't Look Back, okay? And the third one, Third Stage, okay? I don't care what you say, and Boston fans, you may want to like your ears, but Don't Look Back, it's just mid, if not trash. To me, it's a really bargain basement version of their debut album. And really, there's only two songs on there, right? You got Don't Look Back, the title track, which is a ripoff of some of their songs from their debut album. It just sounds the same. And then Feeling Alright, I think that's our Feeling Satisfied. I think that's what it is. To me, that I've heard of that song, but I would take any track, basically any song from their debut album over any song from their second album, their sophomore album. I know their sophomore album was successful. I know it was. It sold pretty well. A lot of people like it. But you gotta admit, when you compare them side by side, okay, song after song, the album, compare each album. Don't Look Back doesn't hold a candle. It doesn't come close. Again, it's a cut rate version of their debut album. Not only that, a lot of it just sounds the same. Again, there's no creativity or anything in a sense, different sounds or anything like that. It's basically part two of their debut album, but just a lot worse. That's my opinion. Okay. Now follow that up with Third Stage, and that came out like what, mid to late 80s, I think. It came out quite a bit since their second album, and that one was even worse. I mean, I know I had a couple hits, Amanda and Coolin' the Engines, I think, but outside of that, it's just that album was ass. And then don't get me after albums afterwards. After that, Boston just sucked. I mean, it just pure sucked. Now I know Boston had a case with management or something. I don't know all the details, but I know there was like a lot of like disagreement or something going on between the art Boston and the either the management or the label or whatnot, and that's why their album releases were kind of long. That third stage, was like what 7 8 years after their second album. Even though I know some of their songs were already recorded way before then, but regardless, if you listen to Third Stage, it's just, to me, it's just trash. And then don't even get follow their other albums afterwards. It just, they really don't exist. Anyway, so when you look at Boston's history since their debut album, it was their debut album was like the top of the top, right? And then afterwards, it's like, and that's it. After their third album, they're, to me, they're gone. I mean, they're just, yeah, they don't really, there's nothing else after the third album. Now, you, if you're saying that this is the main reason why I don't want to have a debut album like Boston's, yeah, I would say that's part of it, but there's other reasons too. Here's the thing. Now, if you have a debut album like Boston's, just so great, I think there's just way too much pressure as an artist to try to follow up. And not only follow up, but at least try to be decent. Or, because a debut album like Boston's is just impossible to match. Now, if you could match it or come close to it, you're a damn good group, hands down. Hands down, damn good group. But again, Boston's sophomore album is just a really bargain basement version of their first album. And they could just never follow up. Now, for me, I would prefer to kind of start like, start out okay, not like Boston, and then have either a follow-up album or albums later that are just as good, if not better. And then for me, at least from a career perspective, album perspective, it doesn't seem like it's just one album and everything is kind of hyped off of that one album. For me, that's my thing with Boston. Everything's on that first album and their debut album, and all albums that follow are just trying to recreate that magic or something like that, and it just can't do it. Now I don't have their second, third, or any of their albums. I did get their greatest hits. Okay, and yeah, I hardly listen to that. I would just listen to this, and that's my thing. So now you would. I know there are people out there who wants to be an artist or with a group and be a successful group would kill to have this. I agree. I get that. I get that. But say you already know you're good and you're gonna have a long career. Okay. I would prefer not to have a debut album like Boston's, and then with a long career, and have other follow-up albums that were just good, if not better, than my debut, as opposed to what Boston's has. And the only other group or artist I can think of that follows that pattern of a monster debut album and just suck afterwards is Hootie and the Blowfish. Remember them? When their debut album came out, was it Crack Rear View? I know for sure at least half of those songs were hits. Like you could not get away from that group. Could not get away. And I know their sophomore album was highly anticipated. Everyone was talking about it, the release date, stuff like that. Even the record label or something, they already knew regardless what happens, they're already going to make money from all that hype. And when that album did come out, I think it was called Fairweather Johnson or something. I'm pretty sure something like that. To me, and I think majority of people would say that album was ass, total ass. I mean, there's only one song that came out of that, and that one was just okay. But that was still successful. Again, riding the hype of their debut album. And they could just never come close or, capture that magic of their debut album. Everything else since then just sucked to me. They're just really bad. Really, if you want to get Hootie and the Blowfish, you just get their debut album, and that's pretty much it. That's all you need. For me, same thing with Boston. Now, besides those two, I can't really think of anything with a hell of a monster debut album. And if they did, I don't know if they were able to recapture or have successful albums just like that, or come close to it, or if not, exceed it. If there are, let me know. Let me know the artists or groups. I can't really think of anything outside of maybe Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. But again, criteria for that was Michael Jackson was already well known from the Jackson 5. So I kind of disregarded him. Yes, he had Thriller, Smooth Criminal. I mean, those albums, Off the Wall was a monster album, no doubt about it. But those albums that follow were even better. So, but again, I take Michael Jackson away. He doesn't fit the initial criteria I mentioned. But outside of Boston and Hootie and the Blowfish, I can't think of any other group that just had a monster debut album. And if they did, I'm willing to bet they just not able to live up to it. They pretty much, after maybe a follow-up album or two, they just kind of fell out. So anyway, personally, again, I prefer not to have a debut album like Boston, assuming that I would have a somewhat long career in the music business as a group or an artist. But if it's, let's say I'm the artist or the group, and I release Boston's debut album and that's it. Okay. I mean, that's the only time I would accept a monster debut album like that, if it was just my only album. But otherwise, again, if I wanted to have a career, a long career, at least 5 years, maybe 10, I prefer not to debut like Boston did. That's all. Or have an album like that, because it's just impossible to follow up. And it's just not only that, it's just the pressure and all that. Everyone's going to always critique you based off that debut album, and they're going to say it's never going to live up to expectations, and you're just going to hear more bad than good. Now, whether you can take it or not, or you care, that's another thing. But again, I prefer to start out a little more, not hidden, but low profile, and then kind of peak and just continue on. That's just me anyway. So tell me what you think about this topic, and what you think about Boston, other groups, anything like similar to my criteria. Let me know. Appreciate it.